So sitting out in the woods, I'm all ready for lunch, got my sandwich out. I'm famous for my love of sandwiches. Glorious scene, about to tuck in, and zip, a fly lands on the bread. Oh, I swat it away, but it comes right back, completely unfazed. It becomes a staring competition over my sandwich, but there's no way I'll ever get that fly. And what's worse is that the fly seems to know that. You know, I'm a human being with a complex brain, at least I like to think it's complex, and I'm much smarter than the fly. I should win, but I can't. On today's episode, we're going to answer a question that has taunted humankind since the dawn of picnics. What is it about flies that make them so bloody hard to swat? From KUOW in Seattle, I'm Chris Morgan. Welcome to the wild. There are more than 120,000 species of flies from the order Diptera. That name comes from the Greek meaning two-wing. These include insects like fruit flies, horse flies, blowflies, but the one we usually come into contact with, like over a sandwich in the woods, is Musca domestica, the housefly. The name's deceptive because you'll find them not only in your house but outside, buzzing around garbage cans, scat, or the carcass of a deer. Needless to say, they're probably the last thing you want landing on your hamburger at a barbecue. To understand why it is so hard to swat a fly, you first need to look deep into their eyes. A fly has two large eyes that cover most of their head, and each eye is made up of at least 3,000 individual lenses called ommatidia. With all these simple eyes, a fly can't focus on a single object like we can. Instead, they see the world as kind of a mosaic. This makes them really good at spotting quick-moving objects, like a fly swatter. And their field of view is almost a full 360 degrees. But when it comes to vision, their real superpower is the ability to see contrast.
It's hard to say this without using a swear word. I grew up in downtown Baltimore.
This is Dr. Michael Dickinson.
They are masters of contrast. They can see stuff that we can't.
Michael is a biologist and neuroscientist at Caltech, and he's a leading expert on flies.
Part of the brilliant design of their eye is that it enhances contrast, and it even does so at the expense of resolution. And in terms of detecting something, contrast is really more important.
Contrast is the difference between light and dark, and those thousands of individual lenses in the fly's eye, the ommatidia, make the darks darker and the brights brighter, and this helps them detect even the slightest threat. Flies also have the fastest visual systems in the world. Their brains can resolve an image 10 times faster than humans. To make sense of this, imagine you're riding on a bike and you look straight down at the ground. You'll see just a blur, but that fly, sitting on your handlebars, he sees everything. To the fly, the road looks like it's moving in slow motion. The world just appears crisper.
The way that I like to kind of describe it, maybe a little bit goofier, but I think perhaps a little more easier to understand, is, when we go to a movie theater, we're watching images displayed on a screen every 24 times a second. And we perceive that all as like motion, right? We don't sort of say, oh, there's an image, 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 right? It just looks like the real world motion to us. If you took your pet fly, to a movie theater, your pet fly might say, well, this is nice, but why the hell you take me to a slideshow?
This probably explains why a fly would be more interested in your buttered popcorn than the movie. As well as an ultra-speedy visual system and these amazing eyes, flies have antennae with extremely sensitive receptors. These receptors can detect changes in air current, like a predator surging towards it. In fact, they'll most likely feel the threat before they see it. Once they sense a threat, they have a decision to make.
Should I jump? Should I freeze? Should I prepare to jump?
And that brings us to another weapon in a fly's escape arsenal, an exceptional response time.
One thing that is a little bit underappreciated, but plays a big role in this, is that flies are small. And so everything in a small nervous system transmits a lot faster.
The distance a warning signal, a nerve impulse, has to travel is very short. Eyes say jump, the legs respond instantaneously. But in that millisecond before taking action, the fly's brain and its 100,000 neurons are taking in all this information: air current, changes in contrast, direction of movement. There are about half a dozen ways that a fly might respond to a threat. One is to make what's called an uncontrolled takeoff. The fly just jumps into the air without taking the time to adjust its wings. Not pretty, but effective, especially when the threat is coming in fast.
Some of my favorite fly behaviors, there's a certain case where a fly, detects something coming towards it, and it sticks its wings up in the air, like it's right about to pull the trigger, somebody in an old gunfight, pulling the gun, and the finger is on the trigger and it's shaking, but it doesn't quite pull the trigger.
A fly might decide that the best move is to not move at all, to freeze. Standing absolutely still is a staple in the animal kingdom when it comes to avoiding the attention of a predator. One predator, the American redstart, a small bird, has a unique way of catching motionless flies. The redstart will expand its tail quickly to spook the insect. The fly, startled, jumps into the air and the bird snaps it up in its beak. Makes me think of that scene from Karate Kid where Mr. Miyagi is trying to catch a fly with chopsticks.
Wouldn't a fly swatter be easier?
Man who catch fly with chopstick accomplish anything.
But when the fly does decide to pull the trigger, he activates the jump muscle, and this is a highly specialized muscle designed to do one thing: jump. The jump muscle also starts up the wings, kind of like pulling the cord on a lawnmower. The wings oscillate at about 200 cycles a second, and the fly zips away, evading that fly swatter. Ah! And once they're in the air, flies are extremely aerobatic, zigging and zagging, flitting backwards, forwards. They do that signature move where they sort of flip and land on the ceiling. They attach upside down with tiny hooks and sticky pads on their feet. Michael Dickinson says flies are able to move in such a controlled, I would say aggravating way, because they have something no other insects have.
They have a little tiny structure, a pair of structures called halteres that are gyroscopes.
That's right. They have gyroscopes. Other insects use their eyes to stabilize themselves in the air, but flies have these halteres.
They're able to stabilize the fly very, very quickly, faster than the visual system would be capable of stabilizing the flight, so that they can rapidly accelerate away from the threat.
Halteres are located right behind each wing, and they hang down, kind of like little tiny drumsticks. They swing up and down at the same frequency as the wings, but in opposite directions. What's amazing is that the halteres evolved from the fly's two hind wings.
So they've sort of gotten rid of they've sort of said, instead of needing you for aerodynamic purposes, we're going to sacrifice two of our wings and turn them into these specialized sensory devices. And as a fly snob, I would say that there are things that flies can do flight maneuvers, performance that just other insects can't. And that's largely driven by the fact that they have these specialized organs that other insects don't.
In fact, a fly can make up to 6 full turns a second, reaching speeds of up to 5 miles an hour. And that might seem slow to us, but in a kitchen, they can get from the ceiling to that open container of potato salad in the blink of an eye. Flies clearly have the advantage over us mere humans, with their visual acuity and lightning-fast response times. So what is the best way to swat them? We put that question to Michael Dickinson, our fly expert.
My personal technique is that I try to slowly creep up on them, preferably from the back. You need to try to get your swatter or your hand as close to the fly as possible before you strike. I mean, other people have different strategies, but that's what I stand by. Not that I like to swat flies, by the way. So
I'm with Michael. I'll probably think twice before swatting that next fly. To think there are so many amazing things going on in that little buzzing body. Makes me want to reach for a magnifying glass instead of a fly swatter. And one more fun fact for your next cocktail party. That irritating buzzing sound flies make, it's in the key of F major. If you have a question you'd like us to answer about any species, drop us an email at thewild@kuow.org. Your question might inspire a future episode. And be sure to check us out on Instagram at @thewildpod. You can find me at Chris Morgan Wildlife. The Wild is inspired not just by nature, but by people who work in it, love it, protect it. We have more information on our website, thewildpod.org. A very special thank you for their kind financial support to Jill and Scott Walker, Rose Letwin, Ellen Ferguson, Anna Kimball, John Taylor, Mark and Rebecca Wilkins, Bob Yellowlease, and Paul Lister. The Wild is a production of KUOW in Seattle and me, Chris Morgan, with support from Wildlife Media. Jim Gates produced and edited this episode. Thanks, Jim. Fun stuff. Our production team includes Matt Martin, David Brown, Juan Pablo Chiquiza, April Craig, Kara McDermott, Tio Popescu, Darcy Riggin-Schmidt, and Brendan Sweeney. Our theme music is by Michael Parker. I'm your host, Chris Morgan.